Hi, I'm Liz, and I've been working with War for about 5 years. And I met Becky and War when I was sharing my story for one of the first times, and we just kind of connected. And then now I basically just work with them as an ambassador. The way my story started was, I knew about trafficking a little bit because I had went on a mission trip. When I was 15, I went to Thailand. I saw what trafficking was in another country. And I thought, okay, that's what happens in other countries. And then when I was 18 here in America, I was actually trafficked for 2 years. I had a fake boyfriend, someone I knew for 6 months. I worked with him. He was very high in the corporation that I worked in. So it wasn't some like sleazy guy off the street I ran into randomly. It was somebody that I knew for 6 months. He knew a lot about me. If you think about if you know somebody for 6 months, how much information can you get out of somebody? So he knew quite a bit about me, my family, my friends, where I lived, what I liked, didn't like, what scared me, things like that. Essentially, I was groomed. And I was 18, which thinking back, yes, you're an adult at 18, but 18 is very close to 17. 17 is very close to 16. So you're still kind of in that teenager, young adult stage. Um, Anyways, I went on a date with this guy. We didn't go on a date. He ended up taking me to a hotel where I ended up being gang raped by 10 men. This is in America. And that's kind of how it started. That was kind of my initiation into that. And from there, it was threats and I'm going to hurt your family, your friends if you tell anyone. And so I tried to go to the police. The guy that was doing these things was going to school to be a police officer. So he's in the police academy. Um, Apparently had some kind of tie in there because when I went to the police, they kept saying they couldn't find him. He wasn't in the system. And I'm like, I can take you to his home. I can take you to his car where he works. And they're like, no, but if you want to go on a date, we can take you on a date. And so at that point, I just kept running to other people, tried to run to a church. They didn't let me in the front doors. So it was about 2 years of trying to find an organization or something that would help me. I ended up finally calling my dad in the middle of the night, and he drove and picked me up, took me home in another state, and that was my safe house. Living back with my parents, and I did that for several years. And before I even knew what trafficking even was, I found out about it years later on the TV that that was a thing. Until then, I had just been told it was bad boyfriends, that it was, oh, it happens to everybody. Those are the things I was told. And looking back on it, I'm like, how many times are people still told that because they don't know that this has a label, this has a thing, this isn't right. And so through sharing my story, I have felt this big call to share my knowledge of what I went through, things that I think could really help someone, especially teenagers or even children. Just identify and know that, like, wait, this isn't right. Even though somebody told me it happens to everyone, it doesn't. And do I remember what that person said? Yeah, this is wrong. So just to know what it is and that it's out there, and then what to even do about it. Because I think a lot of people, maybe they do know what trafficking is or even abuse, but if somebody ran up to them and said, "Hey, can you help me?" Would they know what to do in that situation? Would your 15-year-old daughter know what to do if their friend came to them at school and said, "This guy did this to me last night, like what happened to me?" Would they know what to do and feel confident about that? Um, so that is kind of where I feel like this is going for me and my story, is educating others. And so what that has turned into is the STAND class. And STAND stands for Safety Awareness, Trafficking Signs, Age Appropriate, No, Okay to Say No, and Determination. And we have two different age ranges. We have ages 5 to 10 and then 11 to 17. And I get asked all the time, how can you explain this to a 5-year old? It's a really hard topic. You're just scaring them. What can it really accomplish? And I have two kids, and one of them is 5. And so a lot of this has been tested on him, and to see really what can he absorb, what does he know, what can he learn from it. And we have had success story after success story, even just the other day, of things that he's picked up from those classes. And the reason I believe that this is different than other programs is because, one, I have yet to find one geared towards children that young, because normally it's always 12 and older, because they have to be old enough to understand the information. But what happens is so many kids are becoming victims at 5, 6, 7 years old. So why are we not educating them at 5, 6, 7 years old? So I think something that makes this stand out to me is the age that we're presenting it to. Number two is the way it's being presented. I use concepts. It's not enough to say, don't do that. Like, so let's say two girls go to a party and they're at the party. Something happens. Do they feel nervous because this is their first big kid party, or is something really wrong? Because when you're a teenager, lots of things can be confusing. And they need to be able to identify, this is wrong, this isn't right, or yeah, there's just a cute boy here and I've never been around boys and I'm nervous. Like, there's difference. Or yeah, that was a bad boyfriend, like I was told. No, that was trafficking. And to know the differences, to know what makes something trafficking, what, even if it isn't trafficking, it still could be abuse or something like that. Because I think people hear like, oh, this wouldn't happen to my kid. But what if it happened to their friend and their friend went to your child? And your friend, your kid could be the one to help that other kid. And we've heard story after story working with war of kids helping other kids get out of this type of situation. Because unfortunately we live in an age where kids are trafficking kids or being recruiters, but they also can be part of the rescue. And that is also what this class does. It doesn't just scare your kids and say, okay, great, have a great day. It involves rescue at the end. So I'm going to kind of break down what types of things I talk about in the class and how I will present them, and then why we do it. Why do we talk about those things in particular? So just to say, I acknowledge that I am not the most knowledgeable person in the world about this subject. I don't think anybody could be, because it's an ever-changing subject. But I can speak from experience, and I can speak from having a son that I can see has taken these tools and been able to use them in real life. And so let's see, got all my notes here. And then as far as teaching goes, I've pretty much been a teacher my whole life. I've taught dance. I've taught banking in high schools. I'm a dance teacher now. I've taught for over 10 years. And so I've worked with all different age ranges. So I'm not just running in there pretending that I know how to talk to kids. I've done it for quite a few years. And I understand it's not an easy thing, because, you might have kids that don't want to know about it, or they might want to, or they might not want to. So you kind of have to gear it towards them. And I feel like, with my experience working as a youth pastor assistant for years and years, I grew up in the church, and then in my adult years, um, I understand that you can get all types of personalities and things. You kind of have to gear it and change it towards that. So when I talk about my class, it's not a one size fits all. Like, there are games, but if there's a group that, really that game wouldn't work for that group of kids. I worked with one group, and they were like they're all boys. Like, they had to get up, they had to move around, they had to have fun. And then I had another group that was all girls, and they were wearing dresses and they didn't want to run around. So the class is really interchangeable depending on what the style is and where we're presenting it at. So make sure I get all my notes in before I jump into this. Right. All right. So The one of the biggest questions that I get when I speak and when I go places is everyone wants to know, what does a trafficker look like? What does a victim look like? And I don't think that question is funny, but it's I say, you look to your left or your right, it could look like anyone in this room. Either way. There are lots of signs of someone being trafficked. There's lots of signs of what a trafficker could look like, but that is why I use concepts. It's not always going to look the same. It could look like a family member. It could look like a teacher. It could look like the bus driver. It could look like anyone. And so using concepts helps people figure out, is this a safe person? And so starting with our 5 to 10 year olds, we start with safe. What does safe feel like? And I ask the kids, what does safe feel like? For me, safe feels like this, or safe feels like that. And I let them tell me. And it's very interactive. And I have a whiteboard and we can write down their answers, because when you write things down, it makes their answer important and it makes them know that they were heard. And one of the biggest things as a survivor or someone, if you want someone to be a participant, they have to know that they're being heard. And so that's one of the big things, making sure that whoever I'm teaching, they feel heard. Um, and so we talk about safe. What does safe feel like? Um, who makes us feel safe? So for me, it might be my mom. For someone else, it might be their teacher. And we really understand what that feels like and what that looks like. And then, we talk about where makes us feel safe. Does our home make us feel safe? If our home doesn't make us feel safe, then, and so we can talk about all of that, what makes us feel safe. And then we go into people and we do an activity. So with the 5 to 10 year olds, we use fake money. And I ask the kids, everyone's going to have this money at their table. And I ask them, what things do we buy with money? And I let them tell me. Again, it's very interactive. It's not just me talking to them for an hour. And usually they're like toys, clothes, food. And then I ask them, can you buy people with money? And they no. And we talk about how, sometimes some people do this. And often when they're this young, we talk about traffickers as bullies. Because essentially it's the same thing, someone taking pleasure in someone else being hurt. And so we kind of just go into the very basics, just an introduction. I'm not going to get into with a 5 year old about sex trafficking and this is what it is and yada yada, because that is way too much information. It's going to scare the crap out of them and they're not going to learn anything. But you can teach them that we don't buy people with money. And that is a concept that they can understand. And then we can go into often people will hear about stranger danger. Yes, we need to teach our kids about stranger danger. We don't trust strangers. But what if the danger is in the family? What if the danger is in friends? And how do we approach that? And so we talk about, what does danger look like? What does that feel like? Again, it's a concept, because often people say, what does a trafficker look like? And you can't say it looks like a guy holding a gun on the street, because it could look like, I don't know, a grandma holding a pan in the kitchen, right? It could, who knows? Um, so we talk about concepts. And so with my son, the way this happened was someone picked him up. They were playing around and they picked him up. And he said, Mommy, that person picked me up. And they weren't supposed to do that, because he knows it's a concept, but he knows they're not me or daddy. So they weren't allowed to pick him up. And so that was a concept that he remembered from the class. And so he didn't have to know, and that person wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just he knew that for us that wasn't okay. And this is also why it's an introduction. And what happens is, after the class is over, I give resources to the parents and the caregivers that they can take home and have continued questions afterwards. So that way, however much they want to elaborate with their kids afterwards, they can do that at home. I don't feel like it's my place to to delve very deep into all these topics. This is an introduction to help start those conversations that parents and caregivers can give at home. And then there's some videos that we do watch that are like cartoons, and it helps them stay engaged. So it's not just talking the whole time. They do different activities and things like that. Um, Now, as far as the pornography section, I don't actually say that word. I use a book that we actually use at War, called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And in that book, there's one for 5-year-olds, and it's a very easy read. And I read the first chapter of it kind of as an introduction to what pornography is without actually having to go through it. They also get to make a craft, which is a little person, and we put clothes on our person, and we don't name the body parts. We don't have to go into all that, but they get to make a little take home craft. And what this does is allows them to have a take home visual of I wear clothes. And it just helps them remember something from the day. Think of it like a camp or something. Um, so that would be what that section would be about. And then we do touch very briefly on like medicine, drugs kind of thing. Who's allowed to give that to us, things like that. A lot of times in trafficking, that's not a huge percentage that's involved, but it kind of just goes back to who are our safe people? Who am I allowed to take things from? Because sometimes it could be, if you do this for me, I'll give you candy or I'll give you this. And so it's just all from different angles trying to drill in who are my safe people? What is safe? Is it safe if somebody I don't know offers me candy? No. Because for a kid, $10 might not be a lot, but a candy bar might be really exciting. Um, and then when we talk about survivors, so with the kids that are 5 to 10, I don't share my story. But we do talk about survivors in a way that we talk about someone who was bought with money. And sometimes those people need help. And how can we help them? And so what I do is I bring in this little safe house, which is like a little dollhouse. And the kids get to help me decide what kinds of things need to go in the house. And so this is our little person. This is our survivor. And we say, what would this person need? And they might say food. And so there's a refrigerator. And so they'll put the refrigerator in the dollhouse. And someone might say, well, she needs a bed. Okay, so we'll put a bed in there. What else would our person need? And they might need money or whatever. And so they are helping put pieces together of what a survivor would need without having to pull in all the nitty gritty of that topic. And then at the very end, we allow them to make a make and take bracelet. So it comes in a little container like this, and they could either make like a keychain if you're a boy. Usually they like to do the keychains, and they also can make a bracelet. This is also another take home. And what I think is really cool about this is because even if they didn't learn anything else in the entire class, they're fighting human trafficking by making this bracelet and taking it home, because this represents a survivor. It represents someone. These are products that we sell in our boutique as well. So they're being a part of the rescue without even knowing it, essentially. So it's a really cool all around thing. And so then at the end, a lot of times the kids, that when they're that age, don't quite have questions or they don't know how to ask them. So that's why also we give the take home packet for the caregiver. And they go home with their crafts they made, they go home with their paper, and it has some sample questions on the back. And so when they get home, they can say, was anything that you talked about scary today? Or what did you learn about this or this? And it allows the kid to then give feedback and be able to ask more questions. And then they're in their home environment and they can continue those conversations at home. So that is what the 5 to 10-year-olds will look like. And again, if depending on the types of kids we have, if they need to be, standing more or whatnot, some of these activities will do standing or some of them will do sitting. But we do a lot of, activities or little 5-minute videos just to keep them engaged the whole time. So that is what that looks like. Am I okay to jump into the teen section, or do you want to?
Well, I just was making some notes. One of the tools that we have that you could use, it's hard to have these conversations with kids that are your own at home and go home and say, today we're going to talk about human trafficking. They're going to look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
But having these kind of events or a kit or different tools like the book, reading that book and then talking about it. One of the tools that I think helps is that bracelet, because we've had families come and volunteer just so that they would have an excuse to talk to their kids. And when you're describing trafficking, it doesn't only have to be sex trafficking. You can talk about labor trafficking, and kids understand that if dad goes to work and works hard and doesn't get paid for it, that's evil, right? And that's what people do. There's different kinds of trafficking, and people who this ministry or organization has rescued, they're helping them learn to make a living. And so you're helping them make a living. And so you can move into the labor piece of it, which might be a little bit more understandable to a child.
Mm-hmm.
And bullying, every 2-year-old knows what a bully is. And so putting it in that frame of reference is helpful. And then I know we're going to talk about code words later, but we have a chapstick that has 3 letters on it that you can use when you're talking to older kids. Even little kids, you can make it simple. It's the K-E-Y. K stands for known. So this is most likely somebody known to you, not just a stranger. 90% of the time, somebody you think you know. And then E, it's everyone and everywhere. Bad people don't only hurt rich or poor, they hurt anybody because they're bad. And then Y, the solution is you. You can speak up. It was a child that spoke up, and that's how Mindy was set free. Her parents were selling her to hunters during the hunting season. And so something that simple that a child can have, that's just a chapstick or that bracelet or that craft, those are just very practical, concrete things that you can use with a child to make it understandable. And so go ahead and talk now about the teen piece of it.
Sure. And to add to that, one thing about my classes too is I allow parents to sit in. You're more than welcome to sit in if you're a parent or a caregiver and you want to sit in because you either want to learn about it or you want to hear what I'm saying to your kids. And I think that is so powerful because there's a lot of, schools and places that I've heard that don't allow that, and they don't allow the parents to be a part of their child's life. And I think it's so important that they are, because it just makes another divider that if I have a question, I can't go to my parents and ask them. And so just throwing that out there, that is a part that, parents are more than welcome to sit in. I do ask that parents would wait to have their questions till the end, but that's it.
I just remembered we have one other very concrete thing. We have a social justice kit, and it's basically molds, and we get donated crayons, and we put them by colors, and there are colors in there. You melt them, you put them into those molds, and you make your own colored crayons, and then it comes with a coloring book. And there's a kit. It's a social justice kit. And again, it's just one more practical tool you can use as a parent, like Liz does the craft time, where the person with clothes leads into the conversation about, good pictures are when you're at the beach with the family and you're wearing a swimming suit. Bad pictures are when your swimming suit isn't on and your private parts are showing. And so there are a lot of those kind of tools that help, because it's difficult to just sit down and start a conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't flow well, as you well know, if you're a parent.
Yeah. I think too, I've heard so many times, like, people that have teenage boys. How on earth do I talk to my son about pornography, without that being so awkward? And it was also something that sparked this, because I'm like, well, I have two boys. I don't want that to be awkward. So how can we make it less awkward for parents to be able to have it? Because I've heard, well, we just avoid those topics. Well, so just avoiding it. Kids are talking about it. They're going to talk about it with people they think feel comfortable talking about it. And so that's just something to keep in mind. If they're not talking about it with you as the parent, who are they talking about it with?
Well, just a wake up call. There's an app for 9-year-olds for oral sex after school.
Yeah.
So we didn't grow up with smartphones, but your kids are exposed to that. I'm not saying they have that app. I'm just saying chances are one of their friends or somebody in the circle around them of other kids in the school or whatever is going to be aware of that. And so you can be sure that if you don't have those conversations, you're not getting your time. They're going to hear it from somebody somewhere.
Mm-hmm. My son, who's 5, watches TV, and there was a show on, I don't know, it was just some cartoon, and it jumped into a commercial of something. Commercial was not something I would have approved of. Since then we've gotten rid of the channel, but it's that easy. He didn't mean to see it. He's like, Mommy, I don't know what's on the TV. And so then we had to talk about it. But because we had already talked about it before, it was a much easier conversation. So just, it's going to happen even if it happens accidentally. So when we talk about with the teens, we get a little bit more into some topics, but still very kind of like the preliminary level. I talk about why did I start working at war, and that I am a survivor, and that um, you know, why do I do what I do? Why is it important? And we talk about human trafficking. What is it? And I talk about force, fraud, and coercion. And now those are hard words to really understand, but I made them into a game. And they play them on teams, and we use examples. And so, like, I'm physically hurting you. Is that force, fraud, or coercion? And their team has to figure out which of those that is. The reason I'm doing that is because I remember standing in front of the mirror after the night I told you at the hotel, and I'm looking at these bruises, and I'm thinking, was this wrong? What was this? What could I tell the police that this was? And I remember in different situations through that 2 years, I would ask myself, like, what is this? Like, this is something. And to know that it's one of those things is really helpful, because I could have been like, it's this is what this is. The same thing, like, that's just a bad boyfriend. No, it's something else. Just like if you're dating somebody and you send them naked pictures, shouldn't do that, but that's not trafficking. That's not anything. You break up, and the boy then takes those naked pictures of you and sells them to his friends. That's something different. If that ex-boyfriend then threatens you to do things, or he will take those pictures and show the whole school or something like that, that's sextortion. That's something different. So the same thing became two different things, and that's something where I'd like to make sure teenagers understand, because whether we want them to make these decisions or not, sometimes they may make these decisions where they send a naked picture, or they have a boyfriend that they shouldn't, and it's fine until it isn't. And their friends see, oh, it's just a bad boyfriend, just like I was told, but it can turn into something else. And how do you know that? How do you decide the difference? And so that's why I feel like some of these labels of these words are good for them to know, because it lets them remember, just like in a game, wait, that means it was this was force, they forced me to do that. So it's kind of like a memory thing. um we show a video of a girl, two girls that are walking through a mall, I think it is, and this guy, and he starts going with one of them. And so we talk about the video, like, okay, in this movie, who was the recruiter? Who was the person who ended up being the victim? And we talk about, why do you think he chose her? And we talk about, why do people choose certain people? And they also talk about the friend and the two decisions she could have made. And they show two different endings to the movie. The one is if the girl says nothing, and the other one is if she goes and says something to a teacher. And it shows, the one where the girl ends up missing the rest of her life. The other one is where the girl gets rescued. And so it also shows, you may not be the victim, but you may be the friend that has to make that decision. Should I tell somebody about this? So it kind of shows them this is a serious thing, and it may not seem like a serious thing, but it really could turn into something. Um, and then so we go over, like, there's another game that it's like, how many of this, or what percentages, or what percentage of traffickers are women, something like that. And they have to guess. And so it's just a thing to keep them occupied. So again, it's not just me talking at them for an hour and a half, which is boring. It allows them to be.
Because let me insert here, because 60% of traffickers are women.
Yeah.
And you want that in somebody's mind, because they assume that if it's a girl recruiting them or an older woman, either one, that that's not a trafficker. So that it's a game, but obviously you're embedding that awareness in their mind. In case those of you listening didn't know it, a UN study showed 60% of traffickers are women.
Yeah. And there's just several different statistics that I think are like shockers, and teenagers like to be shocked. It keeps them interested. So like, can boys be trafficked? A lot of times people think it's just girls. What percentage of drugs are used in trafficking? And Becky talks all the time that a lot of it is not drug related.
It doesn't start that way, right?
Right. So being able to talk about things without just like going down a clipboard like this and this, so allowing games, but it makes them think, it makes them be shocked, like, oh, because until you're shocked, until you hear something, like, it will really make you remember, like she just said, 60% of traffickers are women. And that statistic is what made me make a phone call when I saw a girl at a doctor's office that came in with a barcode on her neck. And she was with another woman. And my mom's like, well, that's her mom, obviously. And I said, no, 60% of traffickers are women. I remembered that because that statistic shocked me so much at a CFR. And so being able to have that kind of shock factor, having those statistics and being able to talk about them could be the thing that triggers someone's memory when they're in a situation. So again, it's concepts. It's not always you have a tattoo, you're being trafficked. But it's because I saw that tattoo, it triggered a memory of 60% and so it's allowing them to be able to put pieces together. And then we talk about, why do you matter? Why do statistics matter? We talk about the hotline that they can call. What does that do? We talk about war being a resource. Um, and then why does trafficking happen? Um, and then we talk about we go through a couple of the signs of what you can look for, specifically for a teenager, like what you might see in school or at a party, at a high school party. And we get into a helpline. And why is it so important to have a helpline? Because as we all know, a lot of times we don't like to tell our parents where we're going. We don't like to say, oh yeah, so and so's parents are going to be there. Sure, they're going to be there. Um, and so making sure that your kids have a helpline. And what I like to say is, even if it's not you, make sure they have one with somebody. And if you are that helpline, you have to know that if that person calls you at any time, you have to go, whether it's 3 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, really inconvenient. They say that word, you have to go, because you could be that one person they've called or are able to call. And I know that some people use, I think I think Becky told me it was a word like pizza, and so they're like pretending to order a pizza, and so it's not something that everyone would know. That's like a code word, but for them, that's what it was. And so it could be whatever you come up with your kid, so that they, if you know, if they called and said it or they texted it to you, that you know, two of you know that that's what that is. Um, and then we just get into obvious safety things like, why is it important that my parents know where I'm going or whatever? Um, and then so we get into pornography a little bit. Again, I'm not showing pictures and things like that. But we do talk about like sextortion and things like that. And it goes into kind of like, this is why we don't send pictures of ourselves to our boyfriend or something. Just some generic things like that. We talk about what pornography can actually do to you. Um, and without being like a slap on your wrist, because I like to say people that watch, and there's been studies that people that watch pornography, it's because they're trying to feel connected with people. And it could just be you're really lonely. And it's not to shame somebody. And I always try to acknowledge that, like, you know what? If there's anybody in this room that's looked at porn before, I'm not shaming you. I'm not saying you're a horrible person. I'm just trying to say this is what will happen if you continue to go down this road. And there's a couple games that we do around this, and they're not like sexual games or anything. One is with a soccer ball. And this is really great if you have boys that like to get up. So you have like a goal of some sort, and somebody has to kick the ball into the goal. Super easy. And then you move a chair. This chair represents some pornography that you've looked at. Now try to get the ball in. You're kind of able to do it. It's a little harder. Now there's another chair until the whole goal is covered, because every time you look at pornography, it takes a part of you. It takes a part of your brain. It takes a part of different things. And so it kind of is a visual for them. Um, and us as friends, if we care about our friends, if we have a friend that's struggling with that, it's up to us to be that circle of protection for them and try to help them. Um, and so with their handout that goes home, we have some different resources if someone's struggling with that. We talk about social media. Social media is huge, obviously. Some of it's obvious. Oh, don't talk to people that I don't know. Um, but it goes deeper than that. And I kind of show them on a whiteboard and with some examples of how can one of my friends see my profile and contact me, and I think I know them because they're friends with my friend, and how that whole circle happens when really nobody knew the person to begin with. um and it's not just kids that go to regular school. This can happen to someone who's homeschooled. So we've heard stories from kids that are homeschooled that were talking to people on social media and some things happened. um then at the end, I do share my story. I am tasteful when I say it, um, kind of more generic on some of the things, but so that they can actually hear from someone who went through that at kind of a young age. I was 18. Like I said, it's not much different than 17. You might have a senior in high school sitting there thinking, this is never going to happen. I'm not that stupid to get caught up in that. Has nothing to do with being stupid. I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to a corporate job. I had a corporate friend who was an assistant manager at this corporate job that I knew for 6 months. He met my friends. He met all of the people I knew. I did everything right by the book, and I still ended up in this situation. And someone's like, well, you would have never known. I was like, exactly. And that is why you have to know before it happens, because it's unfortunately we're in an age where it's not if, it's when, and if it's not you, it may be your friend. Because statistically, you or one of your friends that you know in the world could be trafficked. And if somebody ran up to you in their darkest hour and they're like, I'm having this happen, what can I do? Would you know what to say? And so it's not just, oh, my kids are perfect or we don't let them go out or something like that. It's they can be the rescue for their friend. And I think that's so powerful because we keep talking about this younger generation being the ones to rise up and make this change in the world. And I think this is where it's happening. Like they're going to have the information we didn't have. They're going to have the resources we never had. Like safe houses, that I didn't even know what that was. I was like, I've been living with my parents. That's my safe house. But not everybody had that. And not everybody has that. Um, and so just to know that like they're going to be able to be a part of the rescue. So they also get to do the make and take bracelets as well. And then for boys, we do keychains if they want to do that. And again, it's a reminder that they get to take home of what happened. And then we go through what can they do from there. And we talk about different things at war that they can be involved in. Like we have a fashionista style community that they can be a part of picking products that we promote or sell. I talked about my 5-year-old Moses who sold $300 worth of the sheep that we sell at war because he wanted to help put a woman in a safe house for a month. And I talk about, I was like, my son's 5. If you're 15, what could you do? And kind of get them thinking of what they can do. Because if you get a couple of 15-year-old girls involved in this, the possibilities are endless. They started something at their school. Maybe there's a couple of boys that are like, we could do a fundraiser for the wrestling team and do something. You never know. Like, I've seen so many young boys get really excited about this because they had a friend, they had a sister, they had a mom, they had an uncle or aunt. Something bad happened. Maybe it wasn't trafficking, but it was abuse of some sort. They can get really passionate about it. And this gives them the outlet to be able to do something. And when they do that thing, they're then influencing their entire group of friends. And I talk about this, I go, sharing a post that I do on my Facebook or war shares, if they have 300 friends, they've just influenced potentially 300 people. And if their group of friends share that post, they've essentially influenced so many people just by sharing a post. So just like empowering them to feel like they have a voice and just giving them some ways to do it. And so when we do these classes, we also have a table of products specifically like for them. And so they also have the opportunity to shop and to see if there's anything they want to take home. And we've talked about some of the things that we have, like the good pictures, bad pictures, and the sheep and things like that. But just giving them the opportunity to be a part of rescue. And so they go home not with bombarded with information that's overwhelming and scary, but okay, this is what it is. It is happening. It is a dark thing, but we can fight this. We can be a part of rescue. And this is what it looks like. And if you can empower kids, like that's the most powerful thing. And then we open it up to questions, and I put my contact information down, my email, if parents have questions afterwards, or if they want to stay and talk. But that's kind of the outline of the teens course. So, yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We can go through that.
There is one other thing I thought of while she was talking. Amy and I, we should put a kids section on the website while I'm thinking about it,
Yeah.
listing all these things. But we have baby bottles that kids collect coins. I roll them with my grandkids when they come and take them in. And we have one little boy that, every couple months he tells his mom, you have to go shop and rescue those kids. And he brings that bottle in. He can hardly carry it. He's so little, but he fills it with pennies, and he's determined that he's rescuing people, which of course he is. But so something as simple as collecting coins in a baby bottle, has the 911 baby rescue on it. And then helping them either just bring the bottle in and we'll give it back to you empty, or they can roll it. I like to roll it with the kids so they can see how the pennies, the dimes, the nickels, if the men in your life are like the ones in mine, they don't like coins. They leave them everywhere. They don't think they're real money, I guess. So I'm always picking up their coins and throwing them in those pots. But so sometimes just those little things you do. And then when I do it with my grandkids, I let them, if we end up with 20 bucks or 10 bucks, I let them each have a buck and we go to the dollar store so that they get something out of it too. But those are just practical ways to open conversations with kids at every level and help them understand in very concrete, practical ways how they can make a difference and go from being a bystander to being an ally. Teaching them to stick up for kids that are bullied, teaching them to stick up for someone who's being picked on. It starts with those little things. It's really not rocket science, right? So any questions from any of you for Liz? Hey, Vivian, thank you for having a pop-up tomorrow. I saw that in the notes. That's in Wisconsin, right?
Yes. Yep, in Sister Bay in Door County.
Okay. Awesome. You have somebody speaking, or you just sticking up?
Just the church library. We have the women's
Sure.
Bible study meets in the morning, and then there's a women's exercise group in the afternoon. So I've got kind of a automatic group.
Yes. I always recommend people to do it at their church during the women's Bible studies because they've already got childcare. They're already coming anyway.
Yep.
You're not asking them to do one more thing.
Yeah, it
And
worked out great last year. Yep.
yeah, yes. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Any questions from anyone? It's very true that you have to shock teenagers to get their attention. And I don't mean be disgusting, but you have to carefully get their attention in a way that surprises them. Years and years ago, I was asked to speak at a Christian school, and I usually send Liz or someone, and it was one of my husband's board members that asked me. So I went, and I walked in the room, and it was, chapel, and it was bleachers, and all these kids are sitting in the bleachers looking at me like, I dare you to be interesting. And the look on their face, I just wanted to smack them all. I thought, I've been you once upon a time, you little brats. I know exactly what's going over your head. And it just cracked me up. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to be asked back here. So I just put my notes down. I walked up in front and I said, you know what? Forget my notes. Today I'm going to talk to you about oral sex. And every head whipped up. I mean, I don't do this, I promise, but I was just like, they were just so, whatever the word is. I had everybody's attention instantly. And I said, I tell your parents that you guys know everything. Not you're involved in everything, but you know everything. Some of you are, but I tell them you know everything. And some snotty little boy from the audience said, thanks a lot, Mrs. Mack, give me 5. So I gave him 5. And then we talked, and I went back to the office, and the phone rang, and it was my husband, and his board member had called him, and I thought, okay, here it comes. He said, my board member's son was in that chapel, And the board member wants to know if you would come back every year and talk. And I said, no, he can be man up and have that conversation himself with his sons and not pay me, not even pay me, but just ask me to do it for him. And here I was hoping to be tarred and feathered and run out of town and never asked back, and it totally backfired. Anyway, but yeah, it got their attention. And then after that was the worst thing I said. I just said, you guys, this generation doesn't consider that sex. And so into that comes the slimy reach of the trafficker and manipulates that. So here's a comment. It's a great program. It's wonderful to make it hands-on, such as paper doll with clothes, safe house activity that makes it more interesting and they remember it better. You might have mentioned this. Do you go into public schools at all and share with school counselors? Yes, educators, school counselors, psychologists, social workers, yes. And then another one, I apologize if you said this already, my tech inabilities keep the video audio, but people ask about school, would you do this in public schools? Yes. And so she has done it in public schools, and if we get asked, that's what we assign her to. I stopped going to public schools just because I could do that 6 days a week. And so if I got that kind of call, I would call Liz if she was available. Otherwise, we would have someone else do it. But yes, we do these programs for public schools, assemblies, classrooms. In fact, I got a request, I think today, to speak to a middle school, Christian school. And so, yes, we get requests from public and private schools all the time. Any other questions? I want you to know that Liz is raising support through us. If you're interested in supporting a survivor, you can send money, tax deductible money, to Women at Risk with her name on it. It will get put in an account. She's collecting money right now to join us on the Circle Tour. One of the things I've learned overseas in our safe houses is that women in developing countries think they're the only ones this happens to. So when I bring survivors, and I've done this several times from America, it's an eye-opener to them that this is a problem that stalks women everywhere. They're not the only ones. And Liz, how far do you travel by car to do these talks?
Well, I mean, we've been to Florida. So
Right, I flew her, but if you're driving, how far you want to be, either one overnight or back the same day, right?
yeah.
Because she's got 2 little kids. So if it's a weekend, her husband will go with her. He, has a full-time job, but if it's a weekday, she may come and her mom may watch the kids or something. But so yes. But just so you know, she has an account at War Now and is raising support to speak for us, and also to travel to Thailand with me for Circle Tour 2026. And she's also trained in ballet and dance. As she mentioned, she's a dance instructor. And so when we hold the banquet at Circle Tour for 200, 250 rescued women, each safe house choreographs dance to worship music, and Thai dances like their version of ballet. And so it's fun when they see American. The first time I did this, I took Miss Michigan, and she had won her contest through dance. And so Liz will do that for them as well. And it just, helps that sense that, women around the world, you just close your eyes, we're all the same. There's really no differences. At the end of the day, we have more in common than we don't. Any other questions? I have a question for any of you. Is there anything in what you heard that makes you fearful, that you think could potentially be uncomfortable? If this is your first time thinking about it and hearing about it. I know from years and years of speaking that I remember the first time before I founded Women at Risk as its own entity, and my husband was speaking in a church, and I was sitting in the pew, and he said, "Becky, come up here and tell people for 5 minutes what you do." And I hadn't spoken, about this publicly. And so in 5 minutes, I just started explaining, what we do. And I realized right away that I'd made a mistake that I've never made since. And within the first, if I have 5 minutes, within the first minute, I let everyone in the room know that 60% of traffickers are women, because the body language with the men was like, I was like, oh, shoot, they think I mean them. And so sometimes when you're doing something the first few times, stumble into things that you're like, okay, next time I'll say it slightly different. One comment, it was more uplifting to be empowered to know what could be done. Yes, I agree. I will not just tell you one more icky story and then leave you without something to do about it. That's what the news does every night. And I just want to turn it off. You give me 1, 2, 10, 22 things to do, man, I'm on it. But if you just tell me one more icky thing, I don't have any more room in my head for that. So yes, giving very practical ways to be that circle of protection to your own circle of influence and those you love is really important and empowering. Because we're all operating out of fear, aren't we? And we need to know that if the chips are down, what are we going to do? And how are we going to prepare those we love for those moments in life? All right, if you don't have any other questions for Liz, I mean, this is your chance. She's the expert here when it comes to trafficking. But we just want you to know that we're here, and our 1877 End Slavery line, many times the calls we get are just, many times they're rescue calls, but many times they're concerned citizens, family members, neighbors, people who see stuff and just need help processing what they're seeing to know whether or not it rises to the level of the, as Liz calls it, her three strikes. If 3 things get her attention, then she's going to do something about it. I think it would depend for me on how serious the first 1 or 2 are, of course. I mean, I got involved with a woman being stomped on outside Walmart under the smiley face. And that was dramatic enough that I got involved just by seeing it. But yeah, if you see 3 strange things with the same person, then you're like, okay, first time, meh. Second time, oh, now you have my attention. Third time, there's a pattern, right? Third time, that means something's up. And so that's her rule of thumb, that if she sees something and there's 3 things about it that aren't clear, she's going to do something. And she saw something not too long ago Didn't know what to do about it. Her son knew about it, the 5-year-old, and later told her, well, Mom, you should have called Aunt Becky or Miss Becky or whatever he calls me. Funny little kid. But just shows that you can be 5 and be creative, right? He knew to call me. Anyway, not that I would have had the answer, but he knew to not give up. And that's the key, right? That's the key to all of this is if you want to be different, there's only one thing you have to do. It's never, 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 never. I'll keep going all night. Give up. Because everybody gives up on these people. Yes, learning lessons from Moses. From the mouth of babes. Well, I appreciate each of you zooming in from, I think we said 9 or 10 states tonight. And I don't know what's on the agenda next time. Off the top of my head, Amy, I put you on the spot all the time. What is it?
You do, and it's totally fine. Circle tour.
Ah,
Yay.
yes. Yes, we're
Liz,
going to start ramping up heavy for Circle Tour because I've seen that it takes about a year for most people to raise support if they don't write the check themselves and they want to, do it like a missions trip where they open an account and people donate to it. And so starting in January, well, actually before that, as far as Zoom is concerned, but in January, you're going to start seeing more from us in writing about Circle Tour 2026. It's always over Valentine's. So we'll be talking about that next time. Yep.
Becky, I think we'll have some pictures from previous trips. I'm going to try and
that'll be
gather
fun
some to show. Yeah.
And you can go on our website and there's a section there about Circle Tour. You can look up a lot there that explains a lot of it.
A lot of information.
But,
yeah.
And it's men and women. I mean, we use the men for security. And we used to not have men go. And then we started having men go. And it was such a relief to me because they provide such a vital security piece to what we're doing day in, day out. All right. Well, thanks for zooming in tonight and sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. And if they do, take off your shoe and beat them black and blue. Or something.
Good night, Becky.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, Becky. Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you for doing your pop-up tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Well, Amy, I think we should actually come up with a list of things for kids on the website somewhere.
I already sent